Hello, a good evening. Welcome to Novara Live. I am, of course, Aaron Bastani. Tonight I'm joined by Helena, aka No Justice MTG. Helena, how are we?
Yeah, not too bad at all. Thanks, not too bad at all. As always, very, very happy to be joining you on the show today.
We've got a great show coming up tonight. We'll talk polling in regards to Westminster voting intention. That's getting very, very interesting. What with the talk of a new party led by Jeremy Corbyn and Zara Sultana. A reform councillor calls for, wait for it, more immigration. Yes, more immigration. And a schoolgirl gets in trouble for wearing a Union Jack dress. Stay tuned for all of that and more. Of course, if you'd like to support our work here at Novara Media, you know what to do. Sign up today at novaramedia.com/support. And of course, make sure to let me know what you think tonight using the comments in the YouTube chat or tweeting at us or at me using the hashtag NovaraLive. Now, before we start, we have an event coming up that I don't want you to miss out on. For our next downstream IRL, Ash Sarkar will be in conversation with historian William Dalrymple about how the East made the West. Can't wait for that one. I'll be talking to Joe Quinn as well. So join us at 7 p.m. on the 29th of July at Earth Theatre in Hackney. You can find a link to get tickets for that in the description box below. We often talk about government incompetence on this show, both from Labour and previously the Tories. But this story literally took my breath away. I really struggled to compute what it meant, how it happened for a good few seconds. Not only does it involve the kind of incompetence that potentially put thousands of lives at risk, but it also involved a £7 billion cover-up and an unprecedented super-injunction that blocked the whole mess from public view for years. You cannot make this stuff up. Now, it began in February 2022, just 6 months after the fall of Kabul, when a soldier mistakenly released a dataset containing the names of tens of thousands of Afghans who had applied to come to the UK after the Taliban resumed control of Afghanistan. Those named in the dataset had applied under schemes designed for those who'd worked for or with the British government during the occupation of Afghanistan by NATO, the UK, the US, and so on. That meant that the release of that particular data set would put those people and their families at potential risk of torture, detention, and even death if the Taliban got hold of it. Essentially, the military had leaked what could become a kill list in the wrong hands. The Ministry of Defense reckoned up to 100,000 Afghan lives were put at risk by the leak, and that risk wasn't merely theoretical. At least one blackmailer obtained the data set, threatening to publish it on Facebook. In another case, it's understood that a large sum of money exchanged hands for a copy of the list. But it was only in the summer of 2023 that the Ministry of Defence became aware of the leak. With Whitehall in a panic over the consequences of the leak, then Defence Secretary Ben Wallace applied to the courts for an injunction in regards to what was covered. The judge went further, though, putting in place a super-injunction that lasted for 2 years and prevented journalists from reporting both the leak and the fact that the injunction existed at all. It was the first ever super-injunction obtained by the UK government. At that point, Grant Shapps had taken over as Defence Secretary. Operation Rubific was initiated. It aimed at keeping the leak of the kill list top secret, while conducting a rescue mission to bring thousands of now at-risk Afghans to Britain, without them knowing why they were being relocated. Can you imagine? You have asylum in the UK. Oh, wow, how come? How come it's being done so expeditiously, so quickly all of a sudden? We can't tell you. That's how it was working. In any case, when Labour came to power last year, the new government's ministers also signed off on that operation. The cost of the cover-up and the rescue operation was estimated to be around £7 billion. £7 billion off the books, because of course this was a super-injunction that was covering it as well. Now, the Times has been challenging the super-injunction in court since almost the beginning of this whole farrago. Speaking to The World at One, the paper's defence editor, Larissa Brown, explained Operation Rubific.
Again, but what the government's been doing is bringing thousands of Afghans to the UK secretly, making decisions on spending huge sums of money on bringing these people here, deciding whether to set up new hotels for these people, agreeing on, signing off on billions of pounds of money to deal with this fallout. And in the meantime, they're going to be leaving behind tens of thousands of them. They haven't actually told the Afghans that their data was ever breached. And obviously in court, we were arguing for this super injunction to be lifted on many grounds, but obviously there was a clear public interest. And we also believe that it was the right of the Afghans to know that this list could end up in the hands of the Taliban at any moment, so they could take the precautions necessary.
Now, the government may not have told those on the list that their lives were at risk, but some in Afghanistan were discovering it for themselves. An activist helping people in the country who had worked for the British forces during the occupation wrote to the MOD in September 2023 to warn them that the Taliban might already have the data set. This is from the Times newspaper, who call the activist Person A. On September 2nd, 2023, Person A wrote to the Ministry of Defence to say she believed that, quote, with more and more evidence emerging that the Taliban have gained access to the Arab data leak and the information they have garnered via turncoats and torture, we have grave concerns that these families may not survive to be evacuated. She compiled a list of hundreds of former members of the security forces that had been discovered by the Taliban and killed. On the leaked list were members of the so-called Triples, elite Afghan units trained and funded by the UK. Those still alive, she said, were living like they were in a Jason Bourne film, constantly forced to move locations and mix up their daily patterns. Some of them, she said, were so frightened that they were living in caves. Suddenly, they were on this hit list and they're having to move every few days, she said. In response to the leak, a new visa route was created for those Afghans specifically on the list. The Afghan response route identified over 42,000 individuals who would be rescued and brought to the UK over fears for their lives. Many of them were not eligible to come to the UK under existing Afghan migration regimes. To date, over 18,000 Afghans caught up in the breach have already been brought to the UK. A further 5,500, those who have already received invitation letters, are due to be flown to the UK in the coming weeks. And it's worth noting that those thousands of arrivals came to the UK under a veil of secrecy, with journalists even barred from asking ministers about why so many Afghan migrants were recently arriving in the UK. It's no wonder quite a lot of people in this country feel they've been lied to about migration. In this instance, they have. That rescue scheme has now been scrapped after Defence Minister John Healey ordered a review. This is from The Times. On Tuesday, Healey scrapped the secret Afghan response route, the AAR scheme, to bring over the rest of those previously deemed at risk of retribution. This was after the review said the plan, quote, may now be disproportionate to the actual impact of the data loss were it to fall into the Taliban's hands, raising questions about why the super injunction remained in place for so long. What that means is that the remainder of those affected by the data set, and we're talking tens of thousands of people, will now be left in Afghanistan. And today, many of them will find out for the very first time that their lives may be at risk. On The World at One, host Sarah Montague reported on the message being sent to affected Afghans today.
I can tell you that we have just received confirmation of the message that was sent today to all the people placed at risk in the data breach. It's the message via, I think in most cases, WhatsApp, says this is a message from the UK government. Please read it carefully. Do not reply to this message. We're writing to inform you of a data loss incident that took place in 2022 under the previous government. Our records show that this email address, it must have been an email then, was used to make either an Afghan, an Arab, or an EGS application. Those are the different types of schemes. On or before the 7th of January 2022. These applications were held on a secure government computer system. Unfortunately, some of this information was sent outside our secure systems, meaning some of the personal data associated may have been compromised. We sincerely apologise and regret that on this occasion personal data was not safeguarded to the UK government standard. Now, it goes on. We understand this news may be concerning. We expect details of the data loss to be made public in the next 24 hours, and then it gives some advice. You should exercise caution and not take phone calls or respond to messages or emails from unknown contacts. It suggests where possible you use a virtual private network, and says you should limit who can see your social media profiles. You should consider shutting the social media account down if you suspect suspicious activity. And it continues at length. I won't read it all, but ends, once again, we apologise. You can keep checking the MOD website where an update will be posted.
This is a crazy story. This is a crazy story. Can you imagine? You're an Afghan. You're on this list. And by the way, if you're on that list and the Taliban get hold of it, they're a state. Okay, imagine you're a state. You were at war for 20 years by an occupying army, and thousands of people were on the same side as that occupying army. Loads of bad stuff happens. Bad stuff happens in war, okay? If people try and tell you we're the good guys, they're the bad guys, we don't do bad stuff, just they do bad stuff, we just do good stuff, it's bullshit. Loads of bad stuff happens. Your countrymen collaborate with an army of occupation. They're all going to die. Let's be honest. A lot of them are going to die, they're going to have to leave. They certainly can't lead normal lives. Let's be honest about it. You might say, well, so what? Okay, well, we invaded their country. We promised those guys that worked with us we'd keep them safe. Screw them, whatever. Okay, well, fine. Well, not fine for them. They're going to die. Their lives are clearly in jeopardy. They're going to have to probably leave the country. The question is, where? The British government is repatriating, or patriating rather. Where's that even the word? The British government is bringing tens of thousands of them, potentially with their families, 100,000 plus, over to the UK. You might say, well, that's not right. I think unless you want them to literally die, they probably do need to go somewhere, or some kind of a deal needs to be done, right? Which hasn't happened. But the idea that they're not at risk strikes me as absurd. I think any regime, any government country in the world where there's a literal list, it's like a spreadsheet of people that, collaborated with a foreign army of occupation, those people are in big trouble. Any society, at any point in history, anywhere. Can you imagine the amount of sheer panic that's started to generate in Afghanistan for people whose names were leaked over 3 years ago without them ever knowing? Along with scrapping the scheme, John Healey also agreed for the super-injunction to be lifted, which a judge did today, enabling this sorry story to be reported at all. Mr. Justice Chamberlain had previously lifted the injunction in May 2024, but was overruled when the MOD appealed. This is from the Financial Times. In his May 2024 ruling, Chamberlain noted that by that point the breach had occurred almost 2 years earlier. Someone had already posted about it on Facebook on a group with 1,300 members, some of whom may well have been Taliban infiltrators, and UK government officials in Islamabad who learned of the breach soon after the Facebook post had alerted about 1,800 applicants in Pakistan that some of their personal details had been compromised. The rest of the victims would be, quote, better off learning of the data breach from the UK government than a knock on the door from the Taliban, Chamberlain said. Even if the Taliban did not yet have access to the list, the judge said it was likely they would do so in coming months or years. I mean, inevitably. The, quote, enormous sums of public money being committed in responding to the data compromise were bound to attract attention, he said. This was the, quote, sort of money which makes a material difference to government spending plans. £7 billion, no kidding. And is normally the stuff of political debate. There is a real question about the feasibility, let alone the desirability, of keeping the reasons for such expenditure secret. In his ruling today, Chamberlain said that the gagging order had the effect of, quote, completely shutting down the ordinary mechanisms of accountability which operate in a democracy. In the House of Commons today, Defence Minister John Healey outlined the extent of that gag order.
Mr. Speaker, that super-injunction has been in place for nearly 2 years, during which time 8 media organisations and their journalists have been served to prohibit any reporting. And no government wishes to withhold information from the British public, from parliamentarians or the press in this manner.
John Healey also offered this apology.
Mr. Speaker, this serious data incident should never have happened. It may have occurred 3 years ago under the previous government, but to all those whose information was compromised, I offer a sincere apology today on behalf of the British government. And I trust the Shadow Defence Secretary, as a former Defence Minister, will join me in this.
Helena, £7 billion. Is this the most expensive email mistake in history. Just that if they hadn't done the one BCC, we would have £7 billion to spend. By the way, I think if you want to get rid of the two-child benefit cap, that's £3.5 billion. So this one email gets rid of the two-child benefit cap, gets hundreds of thousands of kids out of poverty for 2 whole years. One email.
Yeah, could have made all of the buses in the UK free, which doesn't cost that much according to the IPPR either. Plenty of money that's had to be spent there. I guess this must be where the overspend from the Home Office budget went that led to the quote-unquote £22 billion black hole that Labour discovered when they got into office. Because this is money that was an overspend that we didn't know about until the injunction was lifted. So again, this just shows you can't trust the Conservatives to engage in responsible governance. I think there's a report that came out from More in Common just recently called Shattered Britain. And one thing that was overwhelming from all sectors of society was that people have no trust for politicians. They don't trust that politicians will tell the truth. They don't trust that politicians will do the right thing. And at the basic level, I don't think they even trust politicians to engage in basic competence, right? And for all of the hot air that's been given out from the kind of the media establishment in this country, continually talking about the Conservative Party as being the safe pair of hands who know how to govern the country, right? In the words of Kay not governing is hard. Well, turns out none of this is true. And basically all of the litany of mistakes that we've seen over the last 14 years and now into the 15th year, given the continuity cavalcade of complete lack of care in governing, is the new norm, in fact. And people are right to be skeptical of their politicians and the people who serve underneath them to be able to govern this country properly. If not only do these mistakes happen, but they are incredibly costly, and the government goes to great lengths, incredibly great lengths, to cover up their own backsides when these things go wrong.
Yeah. I mean, look, this is the MOD, by the way. That one email has apparently cost us £7 billion. This is the same MOD that's saying we only get £60 billion a year to spend on defence. It needs to be more than that. It needs to be £90 billion. We've got Keir Starmer saying we're going to take defence spending as a portion of the economy from 2.3% to 3.5%, not including the whole national resilience 1.5%. So, like I say, you're going from 60 billion to just shy of 100 billion. You can't be trusted to send emails properly or encrypt data. You've literally given a kill list to the wrong people, of people that worked with us, trusted us when we occupied their country. We said, look, we're invading your country. We're gonna make it better. By the way, we should never have invaded the country. But I'll talk about that more in a moment. How on earth can the British taxpayer be happy with saying, you know what, yeah, you spend 60 billion a year right now. Apparently, we have no defences, right? That's what all these ex-military guys say in the papers and the TV every day. We're defenceless. Even though we spend £60 billion a year, the French spend £10 billion less than the UK, yet they seem to have, on paper, the exact same army. Actually, they've got more soldiers. They've got one aircraft carrier rather than two, but they spend £10 billion a year less. But we want to spend an extra £40 billion when we send out stupid emails which cost £7 billion. Why? Why should I trust you? But apparently, when it comes to the public sector, all the procurement's inefficient. We can find cost savings everywhere, except defence, which we can just throw infinity money at. And then let's talk about Afghanistan. People are saying, why are you saying Afghanistan like that? Afghanistan, I'm half Iranian. That's how you say it, okay? That's literally how you say it. Why was Britain there? Why was Britain there? Hundreds of people dying. I think that the cost of the war to the British taxpayer is in the tens of billions. I think it's about 45 billion. Of course, now it's going up even more. I think we lost about 400 people over there. I think 450, something like that. Tens of billions, 450 people. And one email cost you 7 billion. Why were we there? I'll tell you why we were there. Tony Blair was bored of having a growing economy. It's like 2001-2 came around. It's like the economy's kind of growing. I don't want to do the hard stuff. The hard stuff would be like, okay, let's build a high-speed rail. Okay. I don't want to do that. That's too hard. It's too hard. It's not that sexy. Let's do war. And folks, there are always unintended consequences. It's not that easy. That's why I'm always saying on this show, you do not want a failed state in Iran, 90 million people. You don't want it. You don't want a failed state in Egypt. You don't want 2 million, even if you don't care about these people, even if you don't think they should be able to live peacefully and healthily in their homes, which I do, by the way. Even if you don't care about that stuff, there are so many unintended consequences when you have millions of people displaced, when you have war, when you have mass violence, when you have human trauma on that scale. There are so many consequences which you cannot even comprehend. And this is a perfect example. And we still have the political and media class of this country doing it. They still do it. Let's just bomb Iran. Hey, what the hell can happen? Hey, let's just go occupy Afghanistan. What the hell can happen? Well, you know what? After losing 450 plus people, after spending tens of billions of pounds, after the Taliban returning back to power after 20 years, you know what happened? The one big consequence of the occupation of Afghanistan, the one big thing, opium production went up. That's it. That's what those people died for. Everything else is the same. Oh, yes. And an email that cost the taxpayer in this country £7 billion. Billion. Terrifying. And the same department wants more money now. We have to cut PIP. We have to cut spending here, there, and everywhere. There's crap on the streets. Potholes everywhere. University fees, £9,000. Nurses in this country graduating with £55,000 worth of debt. But we're going to give the MOD, who just screwed up an email costing £7 billion, we're going to give them £40 billion a year more. It's almost like they're trying to do the dumbest stuff possible. Helena, I'm quickly coming back to you. Robert Jenrick has talked tough on immigration in the last 12 months. It's worth noting, though, that when this all happened, he was the immigration minister. What does this saga mean, do you think, for Tories like Robert Jenrick who are trying to reinvent themselves in opposition?
Well, that's the thing, is that the anti-immigration stuff, I think one of the themes we're going to see on this episode of Novara Live is how it's being sold as being incredibly simple when it's in fact incredibly difficult. And when it comes to things like Afghanistan, when all of the poor decisions have been made in the past, you have to deal with that fallout. And of course, people like refugees and people who have the most legitimate asylum claims in the world, probably, people who are fleeing the Taliban, right? Like, we're going to have to deal with the fallout of all of the things that happen when we engage in imperial conquest overseas. So the thing is that he can say, oh, we just need to leave the European Convention on Human Rights, we just need to reduce migration. And these simple answers pervade our political landscape. There's a really incredible moment on the Trigonometry podcast, which is hosted by Konstantin Kisin and some comedian who's so irrelevant I've forgotten the name of. And they were speaking to Boris Johnson. And they were just like, it was terrible, the Boris wave. You let in all these refugees, all these asylum seekers. And Boris Johnson made the obvious point, which was like, no, we owed the Afghans. We owed these people for the help that they engaged in our ridiculous war that we had in their country. We also were putting their lives in jeopardy by trying to get these people to help us to overthrow the government that then came back because we left them behind and because we left their country to be retaken by the Taliban. We had a duty to let these people come to this country given what we did. And that is a consequence of the war that was undertaken. And people like Kissen, they couldn't understand the position. Boris Johnson had the principle to say, well, actually, no, we have to let the Afghans here. That's what the Refugee Convention is for. And that's the reality. You can piss and moan all you like about net migration figures and the level of refugees, which, to be fair, isn't even that high in this country at this point in time. But when it comes to what happens when we destabilize countries overseas, we do have a duty. We absolutely have a duty to look after these people. So Robert Jenrick, while trying to change his image to be the one of easy solutions to a complex problem, is again at the heart of having to understand that he knows full well that these systems are complex and you have to do what you have to do at certain points if you want to be seen as being an ally that literally anybody can trust. Because if we let down people who we enforce these things on, what makes you think we won't let people down who we enter into voluntary agreements with?
Yeah. There's a great comment here. You can't be pro-war and anti-refugee. The right don't like refugees, but they sure love making more of them. And they're still going. The exact same people who wanted war in Iraq and Afghanistan and to remove Gaddafi in Libya and to bomb the shit out of Syria, the exact same people want to do it all over again. Keep going. It's an addiction. This is just one story. £7 billion. £7 billion. I live in a city, population 300,000 people. £1 billion would transform that city. I'm from another place, Bournemouth, smaller, about 200,000 people, 250,000 people. 1 billion would transform it. So 7 medium-sized town cities in this country would be transformed by that money. That won't ever happen. Those places will continue to decline and deteriorate and diminish because of these screw-ups. And it's all downstream from this addiction that our elites have to war. It's an addiction. They're addicted. 3 opinion polls for elections to Westminster have been published in the last 48 hours, and each, in their own way, is rather fascinating. 2 were published yesterday by More in Common and Find Out Now, while YouGov published their own today. First, that YouGov poll from today. As you can see, it has Reform out in front on 28%, Labour in second with 22%, and the Tories and the Lib Dems in a virtual tie. The Tories on 17, the Lib Dems on 16, the Greens on 12. So far, so normal by the standards of 2025. Anyway, most polls now have a 1-2 of Labour and Reform, or Reform and Labour. Stats for Lefties kindly produced this forecast regarding what that data would mean. As you can see, Reform just getting over the line with regards to majority. Labour on a little bit over 100 seats. The Lib Dems slightly up on 86. The SNP back with a bang on 46 seats. The Tories down to 30 seats. Independents on 14. Greens up to 7. 2,000 sample. But it's really important to say that with this stuff, it's very, very difficult to know at the level of seats precisely how it kind of pans out. But still, you know, Labour and the Tories on a YouGov poll, between them having 138 seats. That's kind of crazy. But it's 2 polls from yesterday, which are really, really intriguing. First up is one from More in Common. This has been reported on X by Europe Elects. You can see Labour on 22%, the Tories on 20%, Reform on 27%, the Lib Dems on 13%, the Greens just on 5%. Here's the interesting one, though, because it's one poll which has a new Corbyn Zara Sultana party in it. They put them at 8%. The Find Out Now polling also has that new left party in there as well. What that means, winning 8%, is that around 10 seats would go to a new Corbyn Sultana party, while, of course, Reform would win a majority and form a government. Also yesterday came this bombshell poll. Now, a warning, it's by Find Out Now, who are viewed as more favourable to Reform. And the sample isn't very big. It's less than 1,000 respondents, I think. In any case, what it forecasts is genuinely astonishing. And remember, this pollster is a member of the British Polling Council. They're serious people. So here goes. 34% for Reform, 17% for the Tories, and Labour and a new party of the left are tied on 15%. That's the real story here. That party led by Jeremy Corbyn and Zara Sultana are tied with the Labour Party. There's also this seat projection for those totals. Again, huge margin of error here. Sample isn't big, but it's still worth looking at nonetheless. Reform on 442 seats. The Lib Dems down to 48 seats. The SNP up on 46. Look, whoever you talk to, right? YouGov or Find Out Now, SNP are doing well. Labour down to 45 seats. The new party of the left up on 21 seats. The Tories on 16, Plaid on 6, the Greens on 2. Just stick on this for a moment. The Tories on 16, Labour on 45, so 61 seats. 61 out of 650 seats for the big two. And I suspect if there was some kind of deal between a new party of the left and the Greens, actually both would get significantly more than that. Helena, what did you make of those 2 polls, which included the Corbyn Sultana party of the new left?
I mean, well, the first thing you have to say is that this just shows that first past the post, it has to go. It absolutely has to go. Like, there is no position at all where people are going to be swayed into voting for a party that is clearly against their interests out of the interests of stopping another party they don't like, when a lot of the political class in this country have essentially merged into one in terms of their ideology, in terms of their rhetoric, in terms of their positioning, that there basically is now an established consensus and a consensus outside of that the public all kind of favour. Like, most of the public now, whereas there was usually previously this kind of sensible centre ground that most parties were courting, that's really shrunk, especially since wealth and incomes have shrunk and been kind of truncated by the level to which that the ultra rich have been increasing theirs in its stead, right? So the middle class aspirational types, like the affluent kind of classes, those people, that group is much smaller than it used to be. There used to be the biggest kind of voting swing cohort that you could try to aim for, and now there's a bunch of very disaffected people for all sorts of economic and or cultural reasons that want to see change elsewhere, and they don't want to see these mainstream parties continually in power forever, because in a period of decline, you move away from the establishment. In periods of decline, you look at an established class and you want to move away from it. And the Tories and Labour are vanguards of that established class that people are sick of. They're sick of it. This is the lowest we've seen their votes in terms of the total vote total, even in 2024. That was the historic the historic low vote total for Labour's and the Tories combined since they became the two main parties in British politics, and it's only gotten lower since. There is no appetite for this, and what we're seeing as well is the mainstream reaction from this is for people to say, "Oh well, you can't vote for the Corbyn party. You're leading to a reform government." Well, we were going to get a reform government under the other polls anyway, especially under first past the post, even with the Labour Party not, quote unquote, having their votes taken from them, the votes that they feel like they're entitled to, by the way, taken from them by a theoretical new party of the left. It's got no name, no leaders, no structure, no nothing. It's a theoretical party. And they're potentially getting as many votes as the established Labour Party of the last century, right? That shows the level of complete disaffection. And also the fact that that disaffection is coming from the left of Labour, right? Labour, as we've seen from so many internal polls, losing far more votes to parties ostensibly to their left, not really on the economy when it comes to the Lib Dems, but certainly on a bunch of social issues, broadly on the economy when it comes to the Greens and when it comes to some theoretical new party of the left as well. That's where they're hemorrhaging votes to. I say, oh, well, you're splitting the vote. Well, you don't represent any of the values that we claim to care about anymore and have been chasing people who are never going to vote for you. So why the hell should any of us stick around? And the arguments about, well, you have to vote for us to stop reform, that's not worth shit. That's not worth shit anymore. No one's listening to it. No one cares. We're not going to get browbeaten into supporting a party that clearly doesn't want our votes. Right? Remember Keir Starmer all of those years ago? They said the door is open and you can leave. Oh, we're shaking off the fleas. Oh, well, now you're desperate to have the fleas back, are you? I'm sorry, it's too late. It's too late now, and it shows that there is huge appetite for literally anything different from status quo politics. And also, I think, a level of political sincerity in the chasing after this theoretical middle ground affluent voter that Labour have been obsessing over ever since the Morgan McSweeney, we need to become the natural party of government, we've changed the party style stuff started all those years ago. And it's that broadly, there is just not the level to which that these people are going to be the major force in politics moving forward. And it's just pushed away everyone that was previously part of that very, very fragile coalition. Because you can win an election off of a base, but that base doesn't exist anymore. And it's moved elsewhere to all parts of the fragmented electorate. And unless Labour offer these people the kind of policies that they want to see in government, they will not return, they will not come back, they cannot be browbeaten, and they, quite frankly, do have somewhere else to go now. So we need a change of the electoral system. And if Labour don't use their giant majority to do that, or get some policies that don't suck, they're going to look at an absolute wipeout the next election.
Yeah. There's a great quote by Gurinder Jozan, who's a member of the Labour Right, Labour First faction. He was on the party's NEC. Yeah, I think he still might be. He was one of these people who were on the Labour Party NEC and then got a safe seat in the last election. And he said, the job isn't finished. We need to follow through and shut the door on the hard left where it can never be open again. The job isn't finished yet. The job isn't finished. We're only at 15%, comrades. We can go further still. I wonder if Gurinder Jozan will be keeping his seat of Smethwick at the next general election. Might struggle there, Gurinder. Might struggle. You wanted the barnacles off the boat. Well, my goodness, they've gone and they ain't coming back. As far as Reform UK's policies go, there's one area where they have always been clear. Migration. And guess what? You might not know. They're not for it. They're promising to freeze immigration and stop the boats. Recently, of course, they've won a lot of council seats. They're now in control of, I think, about 10 authorities. And with victory often comes a dose of economic and political reality. And that appears to have hit Kent County Council's new Reform leader, Lyndon Kemkaran. She's now written to the Labour government asking them to loosen, not tighten, loosen curbs on care worker visas, fearing an exodus of overseas care staff. Kim Curran wrote the letter alongside the council's cabinet member for social care. The Guardian newspaper reports these details. In a letter to Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, and Stephen Kinnock, the Care Minister, they said that about 20 to 25% of the country's social care workforce was from overseas and able to work via licensed sponsorships from employers. This route expires on the 22nd of July, part of a wider tightening of migration rules, including on health and care visas, announced by the government in May. The Reform Councillor's letter warned about the impact on, quote, a number of displaced social care workers who may have lost their jobs, or the sponsoring provider has lost their licence. When care workers' existing visas expire, they wrote, to keep a visa, they would need to earn at least £41,000 a year, the new minimum salary for skilled worker visas. Added to the NICS rise, that's the increase in national insurance contributions, this is totally unsustainable, and the risk is that many care workers at this level will go home and leave providers on a cliff edge, the letter said. They added, quote, due to the challenges facing the adult social care system in general, and care providers in particular, we urge you to reconsider these changes and look forward to your support in addressing these urgent, pressing matters. You're getting what you want, right? You're getting what you want. The skilled visa is now going to be, as that just said, £41,000. That's what Farage wants. That's what Reform want. They say that care workers aren't skilled. You're getting what you want. But look, there's this tension, isn't there? There is this massive tension between rhetoric and easy-sounding sound bites and reality. And the right always talk about immigration as a kind of addiction, right? They say, we've been addicted to immigration for decades. Kind of true. Britain, because it's had a fertility rate below 2.1 for 50 years, really long time, by the way, kind of needs some immigration. We can have a debate about how much, where, and what sectors, its consequences, but it does need some immigration. You have fewer and fewer people being born. You have an aging population. You're going to need some. Even Japan's doing it. The question is how much? And that's where this tension is coming from, right? As some on the right, though, continue to stir up anti-migrant anger without thinking seriously about alternatives. Today, the Department of Work and Pensions has released its latest round of statistics on universal credit. Responding to those figures, academic and Substacker Matt Goodwin posted this online.
More than 1.2 million people who are not from the UK are now drawing universal credit from our welfare system, and more than half of those people are not even working. This is completely bananas. It's costing the British taxpayers an estimated £1 billion every month, £12 billion a year. That's enough to cover the starting salaries of around 400,000 police officers. It's enough to cover the average salary for around 120,000 experienced doctors in the National Health Service. This is completely bonkers. Nobody ever voted for this.
I do love the idea of 400,000 cops. Can you imagine? I think everywhere you turn, you see a police officer. You know, the police officers will be arresting each other. There'll be so many of them. Now, what Goodwin says there is, on the face of it, strictly true. In June, there were 7.9 million people claiming universal credit in the UK, 7.9 million. And around 84% of them are British, meaning there are around 1.2 million people who aren't British claiming universal credit as of last month. But the context here is important. For a lot of people, when they hear non-British or foreigner or migrant, they think demographic change. They think not white people, frankly. Basically people from poorer developing countries who've come to this country for a better life. But if we dig into that 1.2 million figure, it begins to look like Goodwin has left out quite a lot of detail. This is from the DUP. So as I said, the vast majority of claimants are British citizens of various kinds, and Irish nationals too. But the next biggest group are people in the country under the EU settlement scheme. You can see that there. In fact, they account for just under 800,000 of that 1.2 million. So 2/3 of those non-Brits claiming universal credit in June are Europeans. 1.2 million non-British people, 800,000 are Europeans. Is that the kind of mass deportations that Goodwin's followers in his replies are calling for? Their replies in response to that video saying we need to deport them. What, to Germany? To Sweden? Poland? Maybe that's what you mean, but I suspect most of the people saying that really mean Afghanistan, Syria, Iran, Iraq, all the poor countries where the refugees and small boats are coming from. The reality is that's not what's happened. This is very, very different. In his little video, Goodwin also said nobody voted for this. Sorry, that's not true either. The British electorate voted for it twice. Once in the European referendum, and then again when they elected Boris Johnson and his oven-ready Brexit deal. It's literally a condition of the withdrawal agreement. Now, it's worth looking at the next largest group of non-Brits claiming universal credit. They're people who have indefinite leave to remain, and there are around 200,000 of them. Now, the thing about indefinite leave to remain is that you can get it through numerous avenues. You can get it if you're an EU citizen living here for 5 years before the EU withdrawal agreement, or if you're the spouse or partner of a British citizen, if you have a certain kind of job, or if you lived here legally for 10 years now. So you can't infer a lot about the ethnicity of those who've got it from the fact that they've got it. And not that stops Goodwin's followers. Look, migration is without doubt the biggest political issue for lots of people in this country today. Not everyone, but lots of people. It's almost always top two. Whether you think that's warranted or not doesn't really matter. It's just a political fact. And of course, we should have a debate about it. But it should be an honest debate based on facts, not innuendo and half-truths. Helena, when Matthew Goodwin posts that video, do you think he's trying to obscure the fact that of those 1.2 non-British nationals, 800,000 are Europeans? Do you think he knows what he's doing? And do you think his followers know what he's doing?
I wouldn't want to necessarily ascribe any specific intention, because I'm not going to be somebody who's going to attempt to look into and see in other people's heads. But what I will do is try and infer from the way in which we cover these things more broadly within our media ecosystem. I think it's probably more likely that it's just he looked at the numbers, said the number is too high, let's go. Because this happens across our media ecosystem. This happens when the mainstream media do it. Even the supposed iconoclasts like Matt Goodwin, who are attacking the establishment, as he would often try and claim, are doing so because they look at the number and the number is too high. This is continually the framing that we see in terms of net migration, right? If you want to take something that's similar, is that when we look at net migration in terms of the overall figures, the media line is, this is what the net migration figure was. This is really high. This is a long-term high. What's inside those figures? Who knows? We're not going to elucidate any further, because that's not the headline that goes viral on social media, right? In a world of clicks, in a world of AdSense revenue rather than paid subscriptions, you're not there to be able to read the articles. You're there because you want to have people clicking your links, because that's how you generate your revenue, not by trying to get people who want to keep coming back. You want new users clicking on the site to be able to target adverts at them. So I think it's more likely, as far as I'm concerned, he saw the number was high, goes, well, this high number will get loads of views if I post a video about it. Isn't this a scandal, instant internet success? If I was going to ascribe by, inferring from the data that I have already. Because simple answers is what gets people angry, and simple questions and answers is how you can gain virality and you gain a following in the attention economy, right? And when you go back to the first half of the story, which was about the Reform Council lead saying, well, we need more lax immigration policy in terms of care worker visas, it shows, again, that if you don't take these numbers and you look at the reality of what those numbers mean, like how many of the numbers of net migrants are going to be refugees through Ukraine and Hong Kong, how many of them are going to be students, the reality of what happens when you cut those student numbers to university funding, something that we actually have competitive advantage at internationally is how good our universities are, and indeed what happens if you cut skilled work visas because you want to see big number go down and you have no other heuristics as to what's important in terms of your economy, your society, what's happening on the ground, well, the reality of what's going to be happening in the councils that you control. It's very easy from the outside to go, the number's too high, it must come down, the government should do things to facilitate the number coming down. And you get into an actual role of governance like a reform councillor and say, oh, well, actually, we cut these numbers and it's made it worse. And that's the reality, is that Conservative parties, ever since 2010, have said, we will cut migration if we get into government. They've got into government and gone, well, actually, think of what's going to happen to aggregate demand if we reduce our consumptive population. Imagine what's going to happen to our productive capacity if we let our population age any further. We'll end up like basket case like Japan is right now. And we're already seeing they're doubling down at the moment. If you see the polls coming out of Japan at the moment, where people are being even more anti-immigrant when they're also seeing an aging population, also seeing a drop in productive capacity, allowing them to use their central bank to inject huge amounts of stimulus to deal with the fact that they have no aggregate demand. These are all huge problems that big number must go down does not solve. This doesn't elucidate anything into the reality of what migration policies can look at in this country. And a lot of people who are going to vote for reform to see the number go down are going to be up for a real harsh reality when there's no one to pay their pension, when the universities go bust, and when there isn't anybody to look after them once they retire.
I think there's a lot of real truth to that. And also, look, we're talking about people talk about the Boris wave, right? You might like that term or whatever. It's in circulation now. And it's describing a very real phenomenon, which is that immediately post-COVID, immediately post-Brexit, you have unprecedented levels of illegal net migration to this country. I think in 2023, it was something like 900,000 net migration, right? You have Priti Patel as this, iconoclastic anti-migration Home Secretary, net migration of 900,000 people. So you've got that. You've got an email which costs the taxpayer of the country £7 billion. Guess what? It happens under the same government. You also have under the same government oven-ready Brexit, which is, by the way, as I said earlier, that's when we voted for it. If you were saying in 2019, vote for Boris Johnson for his oven-ready Brexit deal, you were voting for this. You were voting for this. 1.2 million people aren't British nationals on universal credit. 3/4 of them, 800,000, are from Europe. That's what you were literally voting for this. This was part of the deal. This was part of the deal. We never voted for it. You voted for it. You voted for it. What can I say? We didn't vote for the Boris way. You voted for it. You voted for the dude. He gave you net migration 900,000 in 1 year because there were concerns about labour supply after COVID. You hated Jeremy Corbyn. You wanted to put national security first. You voted for the party that puts a super injunction on spending £7 billion because of a stupid email. You voted for it. I keep on meeting people who voted for the Tories in 2019, and all this stuff happens which they hate, and they blame it on the left. Not even the Labour Party, the radical left. What was Ash Sarkar running the spreadsheets for the Ministry of Defence? Am I making the calls about who doesn't get universal credit? I don't think so. It's almost like they don't have a serious political project. There is a comms doc. Somebody says here, I think Aaron has been awake all night. Actually, I slept very well. There's a comms doc where we get the great questions and they come through. InfoSurge says, what is the left's debate on immigration apart from let people in? It's just dumb. It's just dumb. And this is where the right is, right? This is where the right is. Dumb foreign policy, and then they have infinity refugees, and they say, oh, it's the left's fault. Hey, if you didn't bomb the shit out of countries, then maybe a lot of them wouldn't be coming. What's the left's debate on immigration? I think we need immigration that works for people. You need to fill up labour shortages in this country. Yeah. A big one is elderly care. And if you want low immigration, it's going to have to be long-term. You're going to have higher fertility rates, and you're going to have increased productivity in the economy. You're going to have to do that. There are trade-offs. The right think there aren't trade-offs. They say, we're addicted to immigration, we have to end immigration. Well, normally when you end an addiction, it's pretty hard. Bad stuff happens. You get withdrawal symptoms. No. We'll end the addiction and I'll be on cloud 9 straight away. It'll be like I'm chasing a dragon. I'll quit heroin, but when I quit, it'll be even better than taking heroin. I feel great. What do you think is going to happen? They'll be like, and by the way, this is what political debate's for. In a free society, you debate this stuff democratically, you get the outcomes that the majority want. Okay? I agree. Let's have the debate. There are trade-offs, but lots of people on the anti-immigration right don't think there are trade-offs. Let's say we get immigration down to net 50,000, really low. What's going to happen? What is going to happen? Some good things will happen, by the way. There will be comparatively more housing supply than there otherwise would be. Okay? There will be inflation, but a lot of that inflation will be from rising wages. So it depends where you're sitting, what part of the labour market you're on. Are you working at all? Right? If you're not working, then the inflation is bad. But if you're working and you live from a wage, it's a pretty good thing. So we'll have higher inflation. We're going to have to pay higher taxes because, of course, we're going to need to train more people to be nurses and doctors. And we're going to have a more expensive elderly care system because we have to pay workers more because it's going to be more Brits working in elderly care. So that's going to cost more. We have to pay more taxes, higher inflation, probably lower growth. But again, growth for who, right? We've had growth, whatever growth we've had in recent years hasn't worked, which barely any, hasn't worked for regular people. So there are trade-offs. Let's have the conversation. But instead, the right go, you just want to let everybody in. You just want to let everybody in. And this is why I think we're probably going to have a populist government of the right. I don't want that to happen. I'm a socialist. For a lot of this stuff to be grasped. And by the way, I don't think it will be. I think loads of bad stuff will happen. There'll be loads of negative consequences. And they'll say, no, it wasn't right-wing enough. It wasn't right-wing enough. Okay, the inflation's gone up. Yes, we've got to tax you more. Yes, the quality of public services has gone down. Okay. Yes, we're actually in a recession now, pretty bad recession. We are already, but I mean, much worse. We're in a per capita recession in terms of per capita output, but it'd be worse. This country is so dependent on globalized flows of capital. I don't think people understand. You said about Japan, Helena. We will be Japan with litter and with bondholders of UK debt being overseas, right? At least with the Japanese, it's Japanese people who basically hold the country's national debt. When it's people overseas, it's a very different dynamic. I don't think people realize what a pickle this country is in. I really don't. We have 5 to 10 years to actually get the fundamentals right. 5 to 10 years with broad consent from a majority of the public. And I don't think we're going in that direction because legacy political parties aren't serious. The mainstream media isn't serious. And the people making all the running are the populist right who aren't serious. They literally aren't serious. You've got Nigel Farage saying that we'll do all this stuff I just talked about, which will mean higher taxes. It has to mean higher taxes. But they're going to lower taxes. They're going to change the threshold at which tax kicks in at, I think it's £20,000. It's presently 12,500. How are you going to fund it? We're going to stop woke. We need to have serious conversations about tax, about spending. You want to cut the administrative state? Let's have the conversation. Where do you do it? How? What are the priorities? No, we're going to cut DEI officers. It's not serious. And they're making all the running in politics in this country right now. Zoran Mamdani is the Democratic Party's candidate to be the next mayor of New York City. That came after Mamdani won the party primary last month and by a pretty large margin. Back then, he beat the overwhelming favourite, Andrew Cuomo, in the final round of voting. Mamdani won 56.2% of the vote to Andrew Cuomo's 43.8%. In reality, he won 125,000 more votes than the former governor of the state. It wasn't even close. It should be added, this primary had a massive turnout too. Over 1 million ballots were cast, making it the largest turnout in an NYC primary since 1989. And of course, remember, this is a closed primary. Only registered Democrats could vote, which made Mamdani's massive win all the more impressive. But despite losing, Andrew Cuomo has decided to still run as an independent. He announced that on X, posting this video.
Hello, I'm Andrew Cuomo. And unless you've been living under a rock, you probably know that the Democratic primary did not go the way I had hoped. To the 440,000 New Yorkers who voted for me, a sincere thank you. Thank you for believing in me, in my agenda, and in my experience. And I am truly sorry that I let you down. But as my grandfather used to say, when you get knocked down, learn the lesson and pick yourself back up and get in the game. And that is what I'm going to do. The fight to save our city isn't over. Only 13% of New Yorkers voted in the June primary. The general election is in November, and I am in it to win it. My opponent, Mr. Mamdani, offers slick slogans, but no real solutions. We need a city with lower rent, safer streets, where buying your first home is once again possible, where childcare won't bankrupt you. That's the New York City we know. That's the one that is still possible. You haven't given up on it, and you deserve a mayor with the experience and ideas to make it happen again, and the guts to take on anyone who stands in the way. Every day I'm going to be hitting the streets, meeting you where you are, to hear the good and the bad, problems and solutions. Because for the next few months, it's my responsibility to earn your vote. So let's do this. I'll see you out there.
That video has, as of this afternoon, 13 million impressions, 4.8 thousand likes. Seems impressive, right? But wait, because Zoran Mamdani, who beat Cuomo for the Democrat nomination, is in his replies. And he shared a link to contribute to his campaign, and it has a hell of a lot of likes. I think it's gone up even since then. It's over 150,000 likes there. I think it's even more. Some ratio. Besides Cuomo, Eric Adams, the former New York City mayor, is also looking to stand as an independent. He was asked if he thought Mamdani was an anti-Semite by Israeli journalist Neria Krauss.
Do you think that Mamdani is an anti-Semite?
Yes, I do. I think that when you're in the streets, after what we saw took place on October 7th, when you're in the street either the next day or days later and don't immediately denounce it, when you're unwilling to talk about global intifada.
You won't talk about global empanada, fritada, enchilada? How many foodstuffs can you list, Eric? It's a real challenge. This guy is, by the way, just happily calling somebody from his city, he's an anti-Semite, he's saying it to a journalist from Israel. By the way, the Zionist lobby is going after Mamdani. We can laugh, and he's ratioing Cuomo to hell right now, and Eric Adams looks like a bum. He can barely complete sentences. But they are really going to go after Mamdani. I think he'll win, my view. He's got a long way to go. Helena, quickly, could one of Cuomo or Adams beat Mamdani to become NYC mayor this November?
I mean, it's such a temper tantrum that these people are throwing, right? Is that they lose their own primary. Didn't even run because he knew he was going to lose in the case of Eric Adams, right? And there was apparently a billionaire-backed campaign to try and get two of them to drop out, including Curtis Lewa, the Republican candidate. The establishment is such an absolute whiny bitch that they can't even agree on a candidate, and they're all wanting to run on their own egos whilst also thinking that they should earn the right of the other voters as well, because if there is a split anti-Mamdani vote. And even on the current polling, where they potentially do collaborate, and one of them is chosen as the chosen billionaire-backed candidate to beat up on the socialists, right? Mamdani still wins, right? Because actually, people don't support Israel in the United States to the level they did, especially not in the Democratic Party, right? There was a really great segment on CNN by Steve Konaki showing changing attitudes, where in 2017. In terms of sympathy with Israel or Palestine, Israel were at plus 14 amongst Democratic Party voters, right? They're now plus 44 for the Palestinians, right? An over 50-point swing from Israel to Palestine in terms of sympathy amongst the Democratic voter base, right? So all of this anti-Semitism stuff will totally not stick in terms of trying to smear Mamdani so people not vote for him. People don't care. They care about the cost of living. They care about what's happening on their streets in their lives. They don't care about what's happening in the Middle East when it comes to the New York City mayor. And if they did, they'd be pro-Palestine rather than pro-Israel. Also, as one last point, very quickly, if people are going to get angry at the phrase global intifada, they need to be very, very willing to explain exactly why they think the first intifada was unjustified. They have to, right? Because if they can't do that, they don't understand what the hell they're talking about. All they're saying is, heard an Arabic word, and it's very scary. Because First Intifada, completely non-violent, apart from attacks by the IDF on civilian protesters, and reprisals against military troops by people who are trying to fight back against being attacked for protesting and for striking and for engaging in civil disobedience. It won international solidarity with Palestine for the first time in half a century, especially from the West, in a way that it didn't at any other time. This non-violent civil disobedience. And the idea that is a bad thing or that shouldn't be globalized in terms of extending sympathy to Palestine, that's indefensible as a position to oppose intifada in that manner. You can talk what I want about the second intifada, whatever, that's a different position. But if you want to oppose the term global intifada, explain to me in great detail why you think the first intifada was unjustified. I'll wait.
Yeah, I don't think Eric Adams is playing at that level, right? I mean, he literally has one line, which is Zoran Mamdani can't even condemn the intifada. He calls it like the frittata, enchilada, empanada. I don't even think he knows what intifada means. I don't think he even knows what it means. The fact that this guy is running one of the most important cities in the English-speaking world, in the world, full stop. I mean, crikey, that's an indictment, right? That's a hell of an indictment. Sometimes a story emerges, seemingly insignificant, which can not only grab your attention, but start a useful debate too. In my view, the story of Courtney Wright is one such example. Courtney is a 12-year-old who lives in Warwickshire. She's apparently a straight-A student who, at a recent school culture day, wore a Union flag dress and was subsequently put in isolation. This story has since found its way into the Daily Mirror, on the BBC and elsewhere, but it was first reported by The Telegraph, who wrote this. She, Courtney, was later told the dress was, quote, unacceptable and was hauled out of lessons and made to sit in reception until her father collected her. Her father, Stuart Field, 47, said he was surprised to learn she had been segregated from her peers due to her choice of attire at Bilton School in Rugby, Warwickshire. Mr. Field, who works in marine restoration, said, quote, Courtney was so embarrassed and couldn't understand what she'd done wrong. There's not a photo of Courtney. She was wearing a dress like Jerry Halliwell. It's just a Union flag dress. Here is what pupils, by the way, were instructed to wear for the day by the school. This is really important. Bilton School Culture Day. As you can see, it was last week, Friday the 11th. We got to 1 million subscribers here at Novara Media last Friday, I should know. A special day is dedicated to recognising and celebrating the rich cultural diversity within our school community. Wear your traditional cultural dress to school instead of your usual school uniform. Your attire must reflect your nationality or family heritage. Okay, that sounds great, by the way. I think that's so great that we do that kind of thing in this country. I think it's so good. And notice it said your nationality or family heritage needs to be reflected in the attire. Well, she's British, right? Makes sense. Union flag. But she was isolated. She was also going to read a speech, which she never got to read. This is the speech that Courtney was going to give to her fellow students. Hello, everyone. Today I want to talk about my culture, British culture, and why it's important to be me. In Britain, we have lots of traditions, including drinking tea. I love talking about the weather, and we have the royal family. We have amazing history, like kings and queens, castles, and writers like Shakespeare. It's also modern, diverse, and always changing, with music, fashion, and food from all around the world, blending into daily life. And let's not forget fish and chips. It's also the way we speak, our humour, our values of fairness and politeness, and the mix of old traditions and new ideas. But sometimes at school, we only hear about other cultures, which is great because learning about different countries is interesting and important. But it can feel like being British doesn't count as a culture just because it's the majority. I think culture should be for everyone, not just for people from other countries or backgrounds. Being British is still a culture and it matters too. It's part of who I am. So let's celebrate all cultures, whether they come from far away or right here at home. Thank you. Now, the school stopped Courtney from giving that speech, which I think it's okay. I think it's fine, frankly. She told The Telegraph this. My speech was about diversity and all the traditions that we have in Britain, our politeness, our humour, we drink tea, we talk about the weather a lot, and we like rugby and football. The school have since apologised, even though the school has suggested reading my speech. I don't think I want to after how they embarrassed me and upset me. She also told The Telegraph that teachers had told her, quote, only other cultures were allowed to celebrate. Look, we'll go on to the rest of the story in a moment. I think there's something really dangerous here. If you tell certain people they can celebrate their culture, their identity, but not other people. I think there's something really dangerous there. And I say this as somebody who's mixed heritage, right? So I'm half white European, half Iranian. I find it weird that I could have gone to school as a kid. I only get to celebrate one half of it. I find that it's kind of odd for me. Anyway, we'll talk about that more in a moment. Courtney's dad, Stuart, is pretty angry about it. He told The Telegraph this. Courtney was so embarrassed and couldn't understand what she'd done wrong. She shouldn't have been made to feel embarrassed about being British, and she shouldn't be punished for celebrating being British. Nobody else I've spoken to can quite get their heads around it. Somebody at the school has politicised the Union Jack dress, even though that was clearly not Courtney's intent. Courtney didn't do anything to be political. It's all about being British, the Spice Girls, and even the freedom at being able to wear a dress. This is just what being British means to her. It's the school who've made it political, and it went against everything the event was being held for. All the kids there are British in my eyes. I like to think I'm a tolerant person, but this was just not right. Also, by the way, this is really interesting. Kids that were wearing dresses that had the Wales flag on it were also treated in a similar way. the Wales flag. So it's not just not British nationalism. People wearing St. George flag, Wales flag, they couldn't. I kind of find that quite strange, to be frank. Part of what makes this country so interesting is the various nations of the UK. Now, as Courtney said, the school has since apologised. A spokesperson for the Educational Trust said this. On Friday, 11th of July, an incident occurred during our culture celebration day that caused considerable upset to one of our pupils, her family, and members of the wider community. We deeply regret the distress this has caused and offer our sincere and unreserved apologies. We've since spoken directly with the pupil and her family to listen to their concerns and reflect on how this could have been handled better. We're committed to learning from this experience, good, and ensuring that every student feels recognised and supported when expressing pride in their heritage. Now, Helena, I posted this on social media on X. I think a young girl should be able to wear a dress with a Union flag on it, frankly. By the way, if there was a young girl wearing a Palestine flag, I think she should be able to wear it. We're meant to live in a free society. And I also think, this is the key thing for me, Helena, I also think there are major political problems downstream if you allow certain groups to celebrate identity and culture and heritage and not others, right? And people talk about the white working class. I'm not talking about the colour of somebody. It's their national heritage. Now, you can say that nobody should celebrate that. We're all British, right? That's feasible. That's the French Republican model. We're all members of the French Republic, all equal under the law, revolutionary republic. My bag, by the way. But that isn't our model, right? Am I wrong in saying that it's going to create political problems if you allow some people to celebrate their background but not others?
Yeah, I think you're right, and I agree with the statement that was made by there was the kid's dad, I believe, said all of these kids are British to me, and I believe that to be the same. And I think actually that chimes in with a lot of the way British people feel. This may seem like a frivolous comparison here, but I'm going to make it right insofar as when you go onto TikTok and you talk about British food, right? British people will say that the national dish is chicken tikka masala, and Americans will come in and say, but that's Indian. I'm like, well, no. It was invented, well, first of all, by a Bengali anyway, someone from Bangladesh. In the UK, it was in Scotland. It was invented by somebody making for British palates, right? And that person may be a Desi immigrant, but they're British to me, and the food is British, and it was made in Britain for British people, and he's a person who was a citizen of this country, right? That makes them British. Their heritage may be different, their heritage may be different to me, but I think we celebrate what's good about this country by embracing that diversity, just as she was going to say that she also celebrated in her statement as well, which is why we have all of these different cultures together, the kind of British people being able to have a functioning and prosperous and workable society with people from other cultures all together. And in fact, Britain should be a multiculturalism success story. You hear nothing but denigration of multiculturalism in the media more broadly. You hear it constantly. Multiculturalism has failed. Swella Braverman flying off to America to speak to the American Enterprise Institute, or Liz Truss at the Heritage Foundation about the failures of multiculturalism. And in fact, I think the opposite is true. I think we're a multiculturalism success story. In fact, if you poll people in this country, I think if you look at comparisons with Europe, only Norway scores higher in terms of people saying they'd be very happy to live next door to a migrant or someone from a different culture. I mean, Torsten Bell had a good article in The Guardian talking about, in the wake of the riots, representing a very loud and angry and small minority. When you look at the polling in terms of people's support for diversity, that's never been higher in this country. And broadly, I think we just need to reclaim a kind of national story here on the left. Caroline Lucas has a really great book called Another England, which talks about, the literary history but other kind of more progressive causes have been part of this country. And people listen to stories. Most people aren't as analytical as people on the left are. We're very utilitarian in the way we look at society. And we need to be able to tell a positive alternative story if we don't want things like the Union flag to be continually associated with people like the radical right who want to reclaim it as being something that is purview of only themselves. We need to look at the progressive history of this country and have it as a counter narrative to what the right wing want to spin as being kind of the imperial history that they want to reclaim. We have loads of progressive movements in this country in our history: the Quakers, the Chartists, the Suffragettes, the Diggers. We have progressive figures that we should be drawing back to, people like Keir Hardie, philosophical people like Jeremy Bentham and David Hume, speaking of utilitarianism. And even in the recent past, we have we were instrumental in the creation of things that people on the right are now trying to destroy, right? It is very anti-patriotic in my mind that the radical right now want to rip up the European Convention on Human Rights that we were central to drafting, and likewise with the Refugee Convention. It's interesting she brings up fish and chips, which was brought to this country by Jewish migrants fleeing anti-Semitism in Europe. That's what it's fish fried in the Jewish fashion. We are a country that is the greatest success that I know of multiculturalism in the world. Nothing's perfect. Nobody's perfect, right? But if you compare race relations in the UK to race relations in France, we have a remarkable success in comparison. Obviously, we need to be thinking about how we protect that in the wake of what we saw with the riots last year. And I think that by creating enemies, by teaching people that only certain cultures can be celebrated, that's how we make those relations worse, not better. And having people be able to celebrate all of their individual cultures and histories and heritage together, that's what's great about multiculturalism. And I think that you're right to say that it is worrying to see these kind of things happen. And again, it's one instance of an overzealous teacher potentially. And so I don't think it's worth extrapolating this as a bigger problem than it is seeming in this case. But this is where we could theoretically go if these kind of things get normalized. And I think that you're right to be worried.
I think it's really important, right? If you're a multicultural society, then that literally won't work. That literally won't work if everybody's culture can't be celebrated. And I say that as somebody who's half Iranian. You know, I want multiculturalism to work. My daughter has Iranian heritage, right? I would quite like the country to work when it comes to that stuff. And I think about this a lot because I live on the South Coast. I'm from Bournemouth. I live in Portsmouth. In Portsmouth, you have Brunel was born there. Dickens was born there. H.G. Wells worked there, believe it or not. Arthur Conan Doyle wrote some of the first Sherlock Holmes novels there. Literally nobody knows this stuff there. You wouldn't know it. What amazing history. Or in Bournemouth, you've got Mary Shelley, author of Frankenstein. She's buried next to her father, William Godwin, basically the godfather of anarchism, and allegedly the heart of Shelley, as in the poet Shelley. You wouldn't know it going there, right? This is really important heritage. It's not, conquest. It's not hurting anybody. It's really important stuff. I think the literature stuff is really, really important. And if people are proud of this country because of Jenner, and Newton, and Darwin, and Henry Bessemer, and Dickens, the social reformers of the 19th century, fantastic. That's amazing. I actually think the left can't succeed in this country unless people get in touch with that history. It literally can't succeed. It's a literal precondition for a multicultural working class in this country to succeed. I'll leave you with that thought. Helena, thank you for joining me this evening.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much for having me. I'm looking forward to next time.
And thanks everyone for tuning in. Come back tomorrow for another live stream from 6 p.m. For now, you've been watching Novara Media. Good night.